That's what I say to my students. All right, it is Wednesday, February 8th, 2023 at 5:30. No, it's not, 6:30 p.m. This is the Finance and Revenue Committee with Nick Allen, Bernie Flynn, and Brian McGinnis. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. Item number 2 is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. Come on down.
Great. Sue Bain, 726 South Penn. To preface for those who don't know, there's been an email conversation going back between Finance Committee, Mr. Metric, on stormwater protection fees. So I started off with, we took out a bond in 2016 to start this, which I just found appalling. Because I know enough of the history that surprised me. The bond also included some fire trucks, some road paving, so forth and so on. So after all that, Nick provided me with, if I'd done my homework in advance of asking the questions, the 2013 budget. Sean provided me with some additional information. So now we come down to the original bond was 9.8 million. Is that right? I think that's what you said. So my question now is, how much of that bond was stormwater protection fee? And how much does that program still owe on the bond?
The exact number of how it broke down as to the building improvements, the fire trucks, and the money for stormwater fee would be in the text of the ordinance that council passed. I don't know it off the top of my head,
Okay.
what that number is. The debt service, I know what the annual debt service is about $110,000 that the Stream Protection Fund is transferring to the general fund to pay for that. And that is a 30-year note. Oh, is this what the original principal was, Barb? Okay. Barbara has the exact number. So thank you, Barbara. So part of that 9.8, 2 million of that 9.8 bond was stormwater related. And as of the end of last year, 1.685 was still owed in principal. So Barb has the exact numbers.
Thank you. That's a lot still owed. Okay, you're bringing in about 1.2 million a year, or that's what your budget is for 2023. Project costs are about 550,000 of that. The rest is administration, professional service fees, a full-time engineer, field engineer. So I would like to have a better understanding of what the professional service fees are. You know, you've got a full-time engineer for 100,000 doing whatever, but he's not doing the project management.
Break down the budget. I think your numbers are wrong. Doesn't sound right to me.
The professional fees, $85,000. Staff, roughly 1 FTE, 104,000. Excuse me, I'm off slightly. But the FTE is not doing, he's doing project stormwater management, but he's not, I'm sorry, he's not doing the design or the annual reporting or anything. That doesn't make sense.
I'm not sure what your question is.
Okay.
So
Um,
the document is from a presentation we got from Will Williams in September. So Will can come on up and I'm sure clarify a little bit of that
Yeah,
as well.
It doesn't really make sense that he's not doing that. Okay. The other question I have is, because this all stems from right now, we're hearing that the university is not going to have to pay their share of the fee. And if the state and everybody else uphold that decision, not only have we lost the magic revenue that we thought we were getting, there's going to be a lot of other nonprofits who are potentially going to want their money back. So comes down to a question of, do we have a breakdown between how much the nonprofits donate, give, fund, how much the businesses, and how much the homeowner residential properties? What can we expect as far as income in coming years if we lose the nonprofits? Because I think we need to start looking at revising your 5-year plan now to figure in that we are going to have escalating legal fees and a potential loss.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And that's something on the finance committee that we are committed to doing moving forward, is planning for any outcome that could result from this. And I know we're still waiting on a lot of clarification on this issue. And I agree that it doesn't make sense to wait until we get that clarification to start getting prepared and to make sure we're planning. And I know we're already doing, like, we're in, I would call it the napkin math phase of this. And that's something I have been, like, I'm planning to schedule a meeting with Mr. Metric probably this month or next month, just to start making sure our numbers are looking good for any outcome and to make sure we have some
Would like to see
paths
scaled
forward.
back numbers for the contingency. And if everything goes full steam forward in the positive, things can be bumped up. The other thing, and it dawned on me as I was driving up here, when this was first proposed, way back when, Chuck Christie heard about it, learned about it. And I'm guessing it was a League of Cities meeting. I didn't attend it. And he learned about it because there were other municipalities already doing it. So it would be perhaps smart to go back and find out who the other municipalities are in whatever other states, as well as in Pennsylvania, and find out where they stand with this right now. Because we can't be singled out.
Yeah, I agree. That makes a lot of sense. Mr. Williams, did you want to speak to some of that fee or that budget breakdown a little bit?
I could speak to some, but possibly not all of this. In the budget, we budget basically one full-time equivalent employee. That is not one person, one employee, one position. What we're trying to do is find a sustainable way to offset the cost of anyone who's working on either the stream protection fee as well as anything stormwater related spending stream protection fee, budget that simply and sustainably. So administering the stream protection fee is probably about half full-time position, but think about Don Edwards' time working on anything stormwater related, any guys from Public Works who are doing in-house repair work, inlet replacements, manhole replacements, cleaning out anything stormwater, street sweeping. A street sweeper is a full-time job. if you add all that up, it's far more than one full-time position. But again, we've thought simply and sustainably we could budget it easily as one full-time equivalent. So that explains the staffing costs for the stream protect in the stream protection fee budget. Obviously, tax exempt entities no longer paying would impact revenue. We are working on calculating that. It's not as straightforward as it sounds. Tax exempt entities that operate in town are not always the owner of the parcel. So the property owner might not be tax exempt, even though the tenant who's been there for 20 years is. Some tax exempt entities have real estate in LLCs for a variety of legal and financial reasons. So it's not, we can't pull from a magic database tax exempt status of each property. It's a little more tricky than that. Budgeting, capital wise too, I think what we always do, we never budget revenue from grants. The capital budget every year is about $500,000. Last year, we submitted over $1 million in grants for capital projects. So grants will be a big part filling that missing revenue going forward if the Supreme Court doesn't see the case our way. And then we're already brainstorming some other things. Our credit program, I think, was thrown in there to be to make the program a little easier to swallow the first couple of years. What we're actually doing for commercial entities is rewarding people for compliance and compliance only with our stormwater ordinance. That seems kind of silly to me. So changes to that program could help boost revenue. And also, I've learned properties we reassess whenever there's a building permit or the property changes hands. And what we've learned from doing that exercise is a lot of our properties are underassessed. And I would say on almost a 10-to-1 basis, properties are when they are reassessed, they're reassessed upwards because whatever reason they were underassessed in the first place. So we've wrapped our heads around that issue and we're trying to figure out a systematic, fair way to do that rather than going property by property, which could get subjective. And Nick Fink is helping with that. So lots of good questions and we're thinking about them already.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
For the record.
Thank you. You're saying assessment of property values. I thought the assessment for these fees was based on green space of a property. That doesn't change value.
I meant the assessment of impervious surface. That's the basis of the bill, has been, always will be. And that's what I was referring to. So basically, we've underassessed impervious coverage. In a lot of it just has to do with the quality of image that we were working off in 2013, 2014 versus the satellites and balloons and other stuff that are floating around the sky.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Any other comments, suggestions, petitions that are not on the agenda tonight? Awesome. Thanks again. I appreciate the questions. We can move on to item. I'm looking at the wrong agenda. I don't know. It's in front of me. I got to flip it over. It is still 3A, which is our January 2023 financials.
Good evening. Starting on page 1, the January 2023 cash balance report. We started the month with $14,750,945 in cash. We brought in $2,938,512. We spent $3,139,229, and this left us with an ending cash balance of $14,550,228. Of that amount, we have $357,663 to fund the general fund operations moving forward. And the other half of the $14 million, 9.7 of that is for restricted purposes.
Can I pause you just for a second, since we were talking about that general obligation bond just a couple minutes ago? So that borrowing that took place in 2016 at $9.8 million, the borough didn't spend all the money. And if you look on the report that Barbara has been putting out every month, they're in fund number 30. That was set up as a debt service fund by 2 managers ago. And in that account is $109,000, which we have discretion to spend on the things for which we passed an ordinance to borrow that money in the first place. So I think we'll be talking about that next month in the context of the roof of this building, since we borrowed money 7 years ago to make improvements to the building. So keep in mind that figure there. That can help us out with those repairs, because right now that's unpurposed. It's purposed dollars, but it's unspent dollars.
What line is that, Barb, up there?
It's the last line, the 3131, the GOB 2016, and that's part of that $9.7 million that I consider restricted. Moving over to page 2, our interfund due to activity. Last month, our due to balance was at $8,050,805. We since have reduced it down to $7,846,425. We were able to transfer $204,000 that the stream protection owed to the general fund. So now we're at a balance of about $7.8 million. I'm about 3/4 of the way through the reconciliation. We're still working on the due to the sewer from the general fund. We do have a few balances on this report that I'm confident that we can write off. The $905,000, if you look at the bottom, the 3230,009, that has to do with activity that was posted in the accounts referring back to this bond activity. And 2 small balances in about the middle of the report, the 01-230-30 and the 01-230-35, which totals about $655,000. I do plan to have that reconciliation before the committee at next month's meeting. Moving over to page 3, the budget to actual summary by department for the year ended January 31st. We had actual revenues of $3,382,367. This is offset by actual expense of $3,305,149. This leaves us with a positive net income among the funds of $77,218. It is important to note that these financials that you have before you are cash basis, and the general fund at this point in time is at a net operating loss of $1,168,292. Looking at the funds, all the funds across the board for the year ended January 31st. As I just mentioned, moving forward from this night on, we will only report cash basis, meaning that we have no accruals in here for any revenues or expenses that refer back to the prior year. At this point in time, general line, all the GL line items should be about 92% of their budget remaining. So when you look across at the board, you'll see any of the line items that aren't meeting that expectation are the ones that we'll talk about tonight. So looking at the general fund, January is typically a tough month. We don't have a lot of revenue coming in. The majority of what we're operating on is EIT and the budgeted transfers that are already in the budget. I do plan to make the transfer that we requested last month from the capital operating reserve, just to fund the rest of the operations until the real estate taxes come in March. So looking at the revenues on the general fund side, we did receive our final payment from the county for the real estate taxes. That was $99,000. That was 4 payments that come in at the end of December and through the due date. Those unpaid balances will be turned over to Portnoy for collections. We did not receive any lien tax payments or stream protection collection payments from Portnoy. We were notified that their systems were breached in January. They have since rectified that solution, but they shut down all operations for the month until they could get everything under control. We actually did receive our first remittance from them this morning. We did receive about $7,200 in real estate taxes and $702 from stream protection collections. We did use $85,000. Do you have a question? Oh. Okay.
What we should do is lend Portnoy, our IT expert, because he may be able to help him.
Bill Mann is the best.
I'm telling you, that Barracuda.
We did use $85,000 of our $804,000 ARPA budget. We paid our first payment for the Brightly permitting software, the asset management program for Public Works, and some traffic planning studies for the High Street project. Moving over to the fire fund. We are not expecting to receive any of our contracted revenues until March. That's per the contract. Townships are not required to make those payments until March 1st and June 1st. On the expense side on the fire fund, as I reported last month and in other months, the equipment repairs and the utilities are still continuing the trending higher. They're not over budget at this point in time, but they're spent at about 80%. So something to keep our eyes on moving forward. Moving over to wastewater, I'm happy to report that the revenues are tracking well within what we would expect at this point in time. So that's good news for that fund. On the expense side, we are seeing overtime, fuel, and heating oil, which are trending slightly above what we would expect at this point in time. Moving over to parking garage. For the month of January, we were expecting 2 payments. The missed payment from November that we didn't get until January. We did receive that, but we did not receive our December payment. We did reach out to them, and apparently they are having, a system issue on their end that I've been promised has been fixed. We did get that money this month, so that line item is trailing just slightly because of the missed deposit for the month of January. On the expense side for the parking fund, we are seeing the credit card processing fees as well as meter maintenance that is tracking a little bit higher than what we would expect at this point for budget. Moving over to liquid fuels, we had the one big expense in that fund for the month was $18,000 for salt. We still have $24,000 remaining in the budget at that time, and we are not expecting any more major expenses until the road paving project starts.
Mr. Allen, the parking fund,
Mhm.
the refurbishing of the meters. It was reported to us last night in parking that the meters are going from 2G to 4G. Is that a line item that we budgeted for? Because that's a pretty expensive conversion, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it's about $300 per meter head, and I think we had budgeted to meet all those expenses in 2022, but there was a bill paid in 2023 on the last shipment, which was about 72 meters, I think. So there's probably a $23,000 bill for capital expenses showing up in 2023 that we budgeted for to finish in 2022, which we're going to tie up those loose ends at next month's meeting as well. These capital projects we thought we were finishing last year, but got done this year.
So the reconciliation, we actually had the money in the fund from 2022, but we don't carry anything over. So how do we reconcile going back and using the funds that we have there?
So that'll be part of our reconciliation that we will present next month. What typically should happen is when we go through the budget process, the projects that aren't going to be completed, we should have a line item in the cash reserve for that. Some items we were able to move forward to 2023, but that will be part of the reconciliation that we'll talk about next month.
Great, thank you.
I did have one follow-up
Sure.
question. You mentioned the Recovery Act money. You mentioned, how much do we have left? 800,000 of that?
We budgeted $800,000 to fund the capital project in this year's 2023 budget. We have about, I want to say about $1.6 million left in unallocated funds.
Okay, 1.6.
So that may be a little off. I know that there was some things moving forward, but I can tell you, if you just give me a second. So right now we have about $1.6 million in the cash account. We have $800,000 in the 2023 budget, so that would leave us around 800 or so that has been unallocated by Borough Council.
Thank you.
Moving over to the Stream Protection Fund, we booked about $580,000 in revenues, which is about half of the revenue budget for the year. That's in line, with residents meeting the 2% reduction by paying by January. We did have one big capital expense that was paid out in the month. That was for Greenfield Park repairs, which totaled $131,000. Action items for next month, we will have the 22 capital expense budget, the reconciliation, as well as the due to reconciliation. Are there any questions?
Any additional questions?
One
Sure.
other thing,
Yeah, go
Mr.
ahead.
Metric, this may be for you as well as Barb. Because of the overtime, wastewater, and public works, I guess. Last night we were told that they were interviewing new hires, two at Taylor Run and one at Goose Creek. Are those new hires replacing people that have left? So the budget would stay the same?
Those positions are currently vacant right now.
Any other questions? Great, thank you so much. Seeing none, we can move on to 4A, which is to approve our January 2023 minutes, which I had no problem with.
Approved.
Cool, we can call that one a 3-0. And then 4B is to approve a resolution to appoint delegates to the Chester County Tax Collection Committee.
So this is an item that we do every year. Act 32 requires that municipalities that levy an earned income tax must have a delegate on the committee. We're requesting that Sean Metric is the primary delegate, myself, Barbara Leonti as the secondary, and Mr. Allen as the alternate.
Sure, any issues?
No,
All right.
I have no question. I approve that, yeah.
All right, we'll call that 3-0, I'm assuming, right? Thank you. Any other business tonight? All righty, seeing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 6:59. Thank you.